And the CDC has created threat levels for these variants. Right now, the New York strain is classified as a variant of interest. There are other variants that are classified as variants of concern. And right now, luckily, there are no variants circulating that are considered variants of high consequence. That is the highest threat level. 45 cases of the New York COVID variant 5126 have been identified in Connecticut. A new state report also identified 283 cases of the UK variant, 7 cases of the South African variant, 4 cases of the California variants, and 1 case of the Brazilian variant. The UK strain is more contagious, and it's set to take over as the dominant strain in Connecticut over the next few weeks. It started accelerating in January.
We're at almost 40% of our positive specimens are B117. And that's obviously a concern.
But the newest strain of interest, 1526, is that New York variant.
Did raise some additional level of interest. Seems to be occurring at a pretty high rate.
The mutations on the spike protein signal people who've had COVID might be able to be reinfected, and that the vaccines may be less effective.
I think it's going to take time to really get that data about what the impact on vaccination might be.
Scientists seem more certain that the New York variant will make monoclonal antibody treatments less effective.
So it's obviously of concern for people who have more serious illness.
Right now, the Jackson Labs in Farmington, the Yale School of Medicine in New Haven, and the State Health Lab in Rocky Hill are all conducting genetic surveillance. They test about 30,000 samples a week. Governor Lamont suggested we need to do more.
We're not really doing as much genetic sequences as we could.
And scientists tell me the best way to stop a virus from mutating is to get vaccinated so it can't replicate. All of this, of course, comes at a time when Connecticut has never been more open. We just lifted capacity limits on many businesses. The state is still hoping to avoid another surge. Reporting at the Jackson Labs in Farmington, Matt Caron, Fox 61 News.